The baby's scream slices through the night like broken glass. Sergeant Daniel Hayes freezes on the stairwell, hand locked on the railing. 32 years on the force, and that sound still stops him cold. Behind him, rookie Mia Torres whispers, Jesus, how old is that kid? But Hayes isn't thinking about the child. He's thinking about the name on the dispatch slip in his pocket. Reeves, a name that's haunted him for 15 years, ever since he coughed Marcus Reeves while a 10-year-old boy screamed from a doorway. The crying cuts off. Silence. Torres whispers. That's worse when they stop. Hayes was supposed to be 8 hours from retirement. A quiet farewell shift, dawn and freedom. Instead, he stood outside apartment 3B, the door marked with 5 letters. REEVES. His radio crackles. Unit 47, status. Hayes hesitates. He could walk away. 8 hours to the finish line. Clean. But the silence on the other side of that door won't let him. Unit 47 responding, he says. On his last night, the past came calling. If you've ever had the past show up when you least expected it, share your story. Some might find comfort in knowing they're not alone. Pinecrest Lane carried the kind of weight you could feel in your bones. The hallway walls seemed to sag under the weight of decades of arguments, whispered secrets, and broken promises. Hayes had walked into hundreds of buildings like this, but tonight, every step pressed heavier than the last. 8 hours left on the job, and already the ghosts were gathering. Doris checked her notepad, though she already knew the number, apartment 3B. Her voice was hushed, her free hand hovering near the radio. The rookie still believed in peaceful resolutions, leaning on procedure, as if it were a shield. Hayes didn't falter. Everyone needed something to hold on to when talking to the unknown. He stopped at the door and knocked, firm but not aggressive. Police, we got a call about a disturbance. For a moment, nothing. Then, shuffling footsteps, hesitation, and a voice, young and strained. Everything's fine, no problem here. But the baby's crying grew sharper, as if protesting the lie. Hayes exchanged a glance with Doris. She shifted, uneasy, her eyes asking the question she didn't say out loud. Hayes had seen enough of these moments to know the answer. Some doors you walk away from, others you go through whether they open for you or not. Sir, he said again, calmer this time. We need to do a welfare check. Can you open the door, please? There was a beat of silence, the clink of metal, one lock, then another, then a third. When the door finally cracked open, a young man's face appeared, mid-20s, maybe. His eyes were wide with a mix of fear and defiance, the kind of look Hayes recognized, someone bracing for judgment, for trouble, maybe for both. Behind him, the baby still cried. Jordan Reeves, Hayes to read from the compliant form. Threw the name snagged on something in his mind, like a thread he couldn't pull free. The young man nodded, opening the door a little wider, but keeping his body planted in the frame. A human barrier. Look, it's just my sister's having a rough night, okay? Nothing you need to worry about. But Hayes could already see past him. The woman lay collapsed on a threadbare couch, her breathing shallow and uneven, and in Jordan's arm, held tight like a shield against the world, a toddler with tear-streaked cheeks. Hayes shifted his tone, not unkind, but immovable. We're coming in. The words carried weight, like gravity. Jordan didn't move, but the resistance in his shoulders slackened. Slowly, he stepped aside. Children's toys are buried under bottles and pills. Doris moved instinctively, crouching low as she reached towards the toddler. The little girl leaned into her without hesitation, tiny hands grasping for comfort in a stranger, because sometimes strangers offer what family could not. Hayes moved to the woman on the couch, asking Doris, who now cradled the toddler, "What's her name?" Before she could answer, the young man spoke up, his voice trembling. "Isla, she's my niece." Doris whispered reassurance to the child, while Hayes checked the woman's pulse. Faint, but there. Overdose. Probably he'd seen it too many times not to know. He called it in. His voice clipped unsteady, though a piece of him recoiled at how routine the words had become. Paramedics arrived minutes later, their movements precise, practiced. A dance Hayes had watched more often than he cared to admit. They worked quickly, stabilizing her, preparing the stretcher. Hayes stepped back, letting them do their job, but his eyes kept drifting to Jordan. The young man stood in the corner, arms wrapped around himself, watching his world come undone. His shoulders were rigid, his hands shaking just slightly. That posture, defensive, haunted, wasn't new to Hayes. He'd seen it before, in booking rooms, in courtrooms, and once in a mirror he'd long since stopped facing. Reeves. The name had kept echoing since the door opened, pulling at him. Hayes watched Jordan now, and the memory finally surfaced, cold and sharp. Recognition wasn't always a revelation. It could be a wound reopening. As paramedics wheeled the woman past and the baby quieted against Doris's shoulder, Hayes' eyes found Jordan, and in that instant, he knew exactly who the young man was. The past doesn't whisper from a distance. It rips open the door and stares you in the face. The ambulance faded into the night with Jordan's sister, its siren lost in the city's noise, leaving behind a silence heavier than before. Isla finally stopped crying, her tiny hands gripping Taurus's fingers with unexpected steadiness. The silence that followed felt cavernous. Hayes knew it well. The pause after the chaos, but before the weight of it all set in. Jordan stood by the cracked window, the bodega sign flickering red then dark, painting his worn face with the weight of too many burdens too soon. "I can take her home now," Jordan said, though the words carried no conviction. His voice faltered, as though even he couldn't believe them. Hayes and Torres exchanged a glance. They didn't need to say it aloud. Home wasn't safe. Hayes knew it, Torres knew it, and deep down, Jordan probably did too. Hayes studied him longer than he should have. There was something about the tilt of his shoulders, the tightness around his jaw, familiar, like a reflection he hadn't seen in years but couldn't forget. He felt a stirring that he didn't want to name, a memory pressing up through the cracks of time. "Kid," Hayes said quietly, "a place like this isn't good for her. Let me cover a motel tonight. Buy you some time to figure things out." Doris raised her eyebrows but stayed silent. She'd been around Hayes long enough to know when he veered from the manual, and she also knew better than to interfere. Sometimes his instincts lived outside the rules, and tonight his voice carried a weight she didn't question. Jordan turned from the window, suspicion flashing in his eyes. "Why? You don't know me? Don't know us?" But Hayes did. God help him, he did. The memory slammed into him before he could push it away. 15 years ago, Marcus Reeves, a late night traffic stop, headlights cutting across a face that looked too tired for its years. A trunk loaded with drugs, not street level scraps. but enough to trigger the mandatory sentencing laws. Hayes remembered the cuffs clicking shut, the anger in Marcus's eyes, but what burned more was the boy in the doorway, 10 years old, screaming for his father, his small fists pounding against the neighbors holding him back. Hayes swallowed hard, forcing the image down. That boy had been left behind. That boy was standing in front of him now, grown, holding his knees like a shield against the world, intent on breaking him too. He reached into his wallet. The bills felt heavier than any paper had any right to. Not charity, not procedure, something closer to penance. He counted them out with hands that trembled only slightly and set them on the windowsill. People need a break, he said, his voice steady, though his chest ached with the truth. That's all it can take to change the direction of a life. Jordan stared at the cash, like it was a snake ready to strike. What's the catch? Nobody does something for nothing, especially cops. No catch. Hayes forced the words out, low and certain. Just a man who's made enough mistakes to know what they cost. The air in the apartment shifted then, not softer, not warmer, but charged, as though something unspoken had stepped between them. Torres shifted her weight, but didn't break the silence. Hayes knew she'd felt it too, even if she didn't understand it. He moved past Jordan, kneeling briefly to adjust Isla's small blanket. The toddler stared, but didn't wake. Her small face pressed against Torres's shoulder, innocence, fragile and temporary, resting in the hands of people barely strong enough to carry it. Hayes rose again, his knees aching, his ears heavy. His gaze lingered on Jordan, who still hadn't touched the money. He looked like a man balancing on a knife's edge. One move forward, and maybe he'd find a way out. One move back, and the whole cycle would devour him. He turns toward the door, motioning for Torres to follow. They would drive Jordan and Isla to the motel at Highway 9, a place that didn't ask questions. It wasn't protocol, wasn't procedure, but it was the only thing Hayes could do. As they stepped into the hallway, the apartment seemed to exhale behind them, a space emptied of life but full of ghosts. Down the narrow stairs, Hayes' boots echoed against the peeling paint and cracked linoleum. With each step, the memories came harder, faster. Marcus's voice, "He's all I got left." The boy is screaming in the night. The gavel struck like thunder. He clenched his jaw, but it didn't stop the truth from surfacing, sharp and merciless. By the time they reached the cruiser, Torres was bucking Isla into a car seat, her movements quiet and efficient. Jordan slid in beside the child, shoulders hunched, like he was trying to fall in on himself. He stayed outside for a moment longer, his breath clouding in the night air. The city around him carried on, cars passing, a dog barking in the distance, the endless hum of lives continuing, but inside him something cracked. He lowered his head, the words slipping out before he could stop them. A confession, a curse, maybe both. God, I broke this family. The words hung in the night, raw and undeniable, a truth spoken too late. The motel lobby smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and burned coffee, the kind of place that existed to be forgotten. He sat stiffly in a cracked vinyl chair, his badge and years of service feeling heavier than his sidearm. Across from him, Jordan cradled Isla, rocking her gently while the child drifted in and out of uneasy sleep. Outside, dawn threatening the horizon, though in here, time seemed suspended, caught in the limbo between yesterday's wreckage and tomorrow's fragile possibility. Hayes should have left by now. The procedure said his shift was done. His report should already be typed and filed, but he stayed, watching the way Jordan's shoulders curled protectively around the toddler, the way he fought to be both shield and anchor for a life that wasn't his own to carry. Something about the sight felt both familiar and unbearably heavy. Hours passed with the hum of the vending machine and the ticking of the wall clock. Torres had left to file paperwork, promising to check back, but Hayes remained rooted to the chair, as though moving would unravel the fragile thread holding the moment together. He told himself it was duty, that he was keeping an eye on a young man in crisis, but deep down he knew the truth. He wasn't there for the job, he was here for penance. The silence stretched long, too long. Finally, Jordan broke it. His voice was low, careful, like someone testing the strength of a rope bridge before stepping onto it. Why are you here? Hayes looked up, meeting his eyes that mirrored both defiance and exhaustion. He could have lied, could have said it was about the motel, about protocol, about concern for the child, but the lie caught in his throat. He felt years pressing against his chest. The arrests, the reports, the cold efficiency of duty that had left behind trails of broken lives. And this one had never stopped echoing. He leaned back, the chair groaning under his weight. His voice came out steadier than he expected, though every word felt like it was dragging barbed wire from his lungs. 15 years ago, he began, I made an arrest. Marcus Reeves, drug possession. Intent to distribute. Third strike. He paused, forcing himself to hold Jordan's gaze. I was the arresting officer. I am the reason your father is in prison. The words hung in the stale motel air, louder than any siren, heavier than any gavel. Hayes braced himself for the reaction: rage, denial, accusation. He'd seen it before in courtrooms and alleys. The sudden fire of men who'd lost too much to the system. But Jordan didn't lash out. He didn't even move. Instead, Jordan adjusted Isla in his arms. The toddler stared, her tiny fingers clutching his shirt before settling again. The simple gesture, so small, so human, was almost unbearable in its weight. Hayes pressed on, his voice breaking at the edges now. I told myself I was doing my job, that it was justice. Following the law was the same as doing what was right. But I replayed that night more than times I can count. The look on your father's face, the way he said he had a son, the way you, his throat caught. You were in the doorway, 10 years old, screaming for him. He stopped, the memory burning hot and raw in his chest. For 32 years, he'd kept his tone even, his emotions walled off. But here, under the fluorescent buzz of a motel lobby, the cracks showed. I broke your family, Hayes whispered, almost to himself, though he knew Jordan could hear. The silence that followed was heavy. Jordan's jaw tightened, his eyes shadowed. Neither anger nor forgiveness, just something caught between. For the first time in years, Hayes had no idea what came next. The truth was out, and its weight now rested in Jordan's hands. The motel lobby held silence, only the hum of a vending machine and burnt coffee in the air. Hayes leaned in, searching for a response, but Jordan stayed silent, the night stretching toward dawn like an unwritten verdict. Then, finally, Jordan spoke, his low voice steady, as if carried for years. I already knew. Hayes' head lifted. You what? My father told me, Jordan said quietly, His voice steady but weight, not in letters, in visits, in the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. He never hid from it. He always said you were just a man doing your job. He made me promise never to hate you for it. The words landed like a punch softened by mercy. Hayes had imagined Marcus Reeves cursing his name for years, poisoning his son with bitterness until hatred calcified into identity. But here, standing in the thin light of a motel lobby, Marcus Reeves' legacy turned out to be something else entirely. He said hating you would only chain me to the same cell he was in. Jordan continued, shifting Isla gently in his arms as she dreamed. He told me if I wanted to be free, I had to learn the difference between blame and responsibility. It took me years to figure out what he meant. Hayes leaned forward, elbows resting heavily on his knees. His voice cracked despite his effort to control it. And did you figure it out? Jordan gave a humorless smile. Almost didn't. Bitterness is easy. At night, I thought about every door slammed in our faces, every time people looked at me like I was guilty just for carrying his name. Anger was always there, waiting. Some nights, I thought about letting it define me, let it be the answer to everything. He looked down at Isla, brushing a strand of fine hair from her forehead with surprising tenderness. But anger doesn't feed a baby, doesn't keep her warm, doesn't make her laugh when the world's too heavy. She came along, and suddenly, anger wasn't enough anymore. She forced me to think differently, to ask if I wanted her to carry the same weight I've carried my whole life. And the answer was no. I want her to inherit something better than bitterness. I want her to inherit the possibility. Hayes swallowed hard, his throat tightening. For the first time in years, he felt something close to forgiveness, not spoken, but embodied. It lived in Jordan's choice to break the chain, to turn hurt into something constructive. Forgiveness wasn't always words. Sometimes, it was the life you built in defiance of what had been done to you. Jordan looked up, meeting Hayes' gaze fully now. That's why I want to study criminal justice, not to follow you, not to wear a badge or carry a gun, but to understand the system that broke us. And maybe make it work better for families like mine. If I can turn all that anger into something useful, then maybe Isla won't grow up with the same scars. The air seemed to thicken around them. Hayes found himself staring at this young man who carried so much of his past in his face. His voice, his choices, and yet Jordan was carving something new out of the rubble. Hayes felt humbled, almost unworthy, to sit across from him. The lobby doors hissed open, and Torres stepped in, carrying 3 steaming cups of coffee. She froze when she saw them, Hayes' weathered face etched with something wrong. Jordan's eyes red-rimmed but clear. She set the cups down carefully. Everything okay? Jordan nodded. Better than okay. Torres slid into the chair beside Hayes, her rookie energy tempered by exhaustion and experience. She didn't press for details. She just sat with them, presence alone, acknowledging that something significant had passed between the two men. Isla stirred awake, reaching for the glint of Torres's badge. Her tiny fingers brushed the metal, and Torres let her hold it, whispering, "She's beautiful." "She's everything," Jordan replied, fierce and tender all at once. "She's the reason I can't give up, the reason I have to do better than the generation before me. Anger is just fear in a mask, and I won't let her grow believing in it." Hayes studied the scene. Rookie, veteran, child, young man finding his way in the world, and felt something she hadn't expected: hope. For 32 years, he thought of justice as paperwork, arrests, trials. Tonight, in the shabby motel lobby that smelled of burnt coffee and tired carpet, he saw justice in a baby's laugh, in a young man's determination, in the handoff of possibility from one generation to the next. Torres leaned forward, eyes brightening with the practical optimism of someone new to the force. There are programs, community college partnerships, scholarships for impacted families, even childcare support for students. If you're serious, Jordan, there are doors that can open. For the first time, Hayes saw a spark of belief in Jordan's eyes. Not survival, not resignation, belief. Hayes found himself speaking before he thought it through. I came in tonight thinking it was about endings. My last shift, last call, last chance to walk away clean. His voice lowered, heavy with dawning truth. But maybe it's about beginnings instead. Yours, hers, and maybe even mine. They sat together in a fragile tableau. Rookie, veteran, and the son of a man Hayes once arrested, bound not by law but by choice, not by blood but by hope. The lobby clock read 6:40. Hayes had stopped counting hours ago, but now the time mattered again. Outside, the horizon softened to pale gold as dawn pressed against the motel windows. On his last shift, Hayes knew he wouldn't remember the cries or the silence. He would remember Isla, her tiny hand curled around the badge, her giggle catching the light like something brighter than the night they'd enjoyed. That moment he knew would outlive him. Jordan rose, shifting Isla securely in his arms. I should get her somewhere quiet, somewhere she can rest. Doris nodded, determination lighting her face. I'll make the calls, the daycare, the scholarships. We'll figure it out. Hayes instinctively reached for his wallet, but Jordan stopped him with a small shake of the head. You've done enough. Hayes hesitated, then nodded. It's Daniel now, he said quietly, surprised at how right it felt. Not Surgeon, not Hayes, just Daniel. Jordan's expression softened. He extended his hands. Their palms met firmly. The grip was calloused, strong. Hayes didn't feel forgiveness exactly, but something rarer, the possibility of transformation. As they let go, Jordan's gaze shifted towards the rising sun. His voice was almost a vow. My father told me not to hate you. Tonight, I think I finally understand why. The words lingered, luminous, as dawn finally broke through the glass. The first rays spilled across the room in gold, dissolving the shadows of the night. The last shift of Sheriff Daniel Hayes' career wasn't dramatic. No sirens blaring, no guns drawn, no chase down back alleys. By the time he returned to the station, dawn had begun to paint the sky in pale strokes of golden gray. The building was hushed, not empty, but settled, like a chapter closing. Hayes stepped into his office, closed the door with quiet finality, and sat at the desk that had borne his long nights and impossible choices. For a long moment, he stared at the badge resting on the blotter. 30 years of service reflected in the dull shine of worn metal. Not a perfect record, not a spotless life, just years of showing up, learning, failing, and trying again. He picked it up one last time, turned it over in his palm, and then set it in the drawer with deliberate care. When the wood slid shut, he exhaled, slow, steady, and final. The badge no longer belonged to him, and for the first time in decades, he didn't feel its weight pressing on his chest. Across town, another day was beginning. In a modest training room. In a modest training room, Jordan Reeves tugged at the collar of his new academy uniform. The shirt didn't quite fit yet, too stiff, too crisp, but he wore it like armor. He sat in the front row, notebook open, pen poised, eyes fixed forward. It was the moment that echoed Hayes' first day all those years ago. Nervous energy, untested resolve, and the sense that what he was stepping into would change him forever. Jordan wasn't fueled by anger anymore. He wasn't chasing revenge. He was stepping into service because he had seen what it looked like when done with dignity. Back at the station, Hayes gathered the last of his belongings into a box, a photo, a mug, a few files, and carried it out into the light. The town he had patrolled for decades stretched before him, familiar yet new in the quiet glow of morning. For the first time, he wasn't looking for what might go wrong. He was simply walking home. His voice lingered in the silence, not for Taurus, not for Jordan, but for anyone listening, anyone who might one day carry the same weight. Forgiveness is stronger than regret. Legacy isn't medals or arrests, it's what we inspire in others. Hayes reached his truck and paused, letting the sun warm his face, letting the peace settle into his chest. He climbed in, started the engine, and pulled into the waking streets. No longer their sheriff, but always their neighbor. And as the camera of memory pulled back, one man at peace, one young recruit beginning, his story closed on a truth that outlives titles and time. Everyday heroes are all around us, not because they're perfect, but because they turn their mistakes into something worth passing on.